The thunder crashed outside as James Miller sat in his study, reviewing the medical files of a horse he had treated earlier that day. The life of a countryside veterinarian was quieter than his previous work as a combat medic, but he preferred it that way. 10 years of patching up wounded soldiers had left him with enough excitement for a lifetime. Lightning flashed again, illuminating his backyard through the rain-streaked windows. As he looked up from his papers, something caught his eye. A soft, pulsing blue glow coming from behind his tool shed. At first, he thought it might be someone's flashlight, but the color was wrong. Too bright. Too alien. James grabbed his medical bag out of habit and pulled on his rain jacket. Whatever it was, it needed checking. Living alone at the edge of town meant he couldn't just call a neighbor to investigate. The mud squelched under his boots as he made his way across the yard. The rain was coming down harder now, but the strange light kept pulsing, casting eerie shadows against the shed's wooden walls. As he rounded the corner, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, lying in a shallow crater that hadn't existed this morning, was a woman, but she wasn't like any woman he'd ever seen. Her skin had a subtle iridescent quality, like mother of pearl, and seemed to shift colors with each raindrop that fell on it. Her features were delicate but slightly wrong, her eyes too large, her fingers too long. She wore what looked like a tight-fitting suit made of some kind of metallic fabric that seemed to flow like liquid mercury. She was also clearly injured. Dark purple fluid, blood, he realized, was seeping from a wound in her side. "Hey," he called out softly, approaching slowly with his hands raised. "Can you hear me?" The alien woman didn't respond. Her chest was rising and falling rapidly, suggesting she was having trouble breathing. James's medical training kicked in, overriding any fear or hesitation. Injured was injured, human or not. He knelt beside her, opening his medical bag. The wound in her side looked like some kind of energy burn, reminding him of the plasma weapon injuries he treated during the border wars. Her skin felt cool to the touch, cooler than a human should be, but he had no way of knowing if that was normal for her species. As he examined her, she clutched something tighter in her right hand, a crystalline device about the size of a smartphone, glowing with the same blue light that had caught his attention. Her grip was so tight that her knuckles had turned a pale silvery color. "I'm going to help you," he said clearly, even though he wasn't sure she could understand. "But we need to get you out of this rain." James noticed scorch marks on her suit that suggested she'd been in some kind of fight. Whatever had happened to her, someone had done this deliberately. He glanced up at the sky, half expecting to see more aliens or some kind of spacecraft, but there was only rain and lightning. Making a quick decision, he carefully lifted her in his arms. She was surprisingly light, almost as if her bones were hollow like a bird's. The crystal device she held pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed. As he carried her toward his house, she stirred slightly, her large eyes opening just a crack. They were completely silver, with no visible pupils, and seemed to shimmer in the darkness. She tried to speak, making a sound like wind chimes in a breeze, before losing consciousness again. James kicked his back door open and carried her inside. His living room couch would have to serve as an examination table. As he laid her down, he realized his life was about to become a lot less quiet. But looking at her injured form, he knew he couldn't have done anything else. Some oaths transcended species. James spent the next few hours treating the alien woman's wounds as best he could. He had cleaned and dressed the energy burn on her side, though he wasn't sure if human medical techniques would work on her unusual physiology. The storm outside had grown stronger, rain drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. It was nearly midnight when she finally stirred. Her silver eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on James with an intensity that made him step back. She sat up quickly, then winced at the movement. "Easy there," James said, raising his hands to show they were empty. "You're safe here." The alien woman looked around the room, taking in every detail with those mercury-colored eyes. Her hand went to the crystal device she'd been holding earlier, which James had placed on the coffee table beside her. She relaxed slightly when she saw it was within reach. She opened her mouth and made that wind chime sound again, then frowned when James shook his head to show he didn't understand. Suddenly, she reached out and touched his forearm with her long, delicate fingers. A strange, tingling sensation spread up his arm, like gentle static electricity. James started to pull away, but the alien woman held up her other hand in what was clearly meant to be a calming gesture. "Please, remain still," she said, her voice carrying an odd musical quality. "I am learning your language through touch. It will only take a moment." James watched in amazement as her speech became more fluid with each word. The tingling sensation continued for another few seconds, then stopped. "There," she said, now speaking perfect English. "That's much better. You may call me Ray. It's close enough to my real name in your language." "I'm James," he replied, still stunned by what had just happened. "James Miller. I found you injured in my backyard." Ray nodded, touching the bandaged wound on her side. "You treated my injuries. Why would you help someone so clearly not of your world?" "I'm a doctor. Well, a veterinarian now, but I used to be a combat medic. Helping the injured is what I do. Human or not doesn't matter." A look of confusion crossed Ray's pearlescent features. "Your species is known to be territorial and often hostile to the unknown. Yet you brought a stranger, an alien, into your home without hesitation. Maybe your information about humans needs updating," James said with a slight smile. "We can be surprising sometimes." Ray's expression became serious. "You have no idea how surprising." She glanced at the window, then quickly looked away. "I should leave. I've already put you at risk by being here." When she tried to stand, her legs buckled. James caught her before she could fall. "You're not going anywhere in this condition," he said firmly. "Whatever you're running from, you need time to heal first." Ray looked at him for a long moment, then at his hands still supporting her arms. "Your people really are remarkable. You know nothing about me, yet you offer shelter and medical care, even knowing there might be danger." "Speaking of danger," James said, helping her sit back down, "want to tell me what happened to you? Those aren't accidental injuries." Ray picked up her crystal device, which pulsed with soft blue light at her touch. "It's complicated, and the less you know, the safer you'll be." She paused, looking troubled. "But they'll be looking for me. They're always looking." "Who's they?" Before Ray could answer, a deep humming sound filled the air, making the windows vibrate. Ray's face drained of color, turning her iridescent skin almost white. "They're here," she whispered, clutching the crystal device tighter. "I'm so sorry, James. I never meant to bring this to your world." The humming grew louder, and through the rain-streaked windows, James could see new lights in the sky, and these weren't from the storm. The humming grew stronger until the entire house seemed to vibrate. 3 bright lights, arranged in a triangle formation, hovered above James's property. They were clearly ships of some kind, their metallic surfaces reflecting the lightning that still flashed across the sky. "We need to move," Ray said, forcing herself to stand despite the pain. "They'll scan the house first." James quickly grabbed his medical bag and helped support Ray. "My truck's in the garage. We can." "No," Ray cut him off. "They'll detect any powered vehicle instantly." She held up her crystal device, which was now pulsing with rapid, irregular flashes. "They're looking for the energy signature of this data core. We need to stay away from anything electronic." A bright beam of purple light suddenly shot down from one of the ships, sweeping across the yard like a searchlight. James pulled Ray away from the window just as it passed over the house. "What exactly are they looking for?" James asked as they moved toward the back door. "Who are these people?" Ray's silver eyes darted to the window again before she answered. "They're from my world. A military faction that wants to maintain our technological superiority over other species." She held up the crystal device. "This contains research data proving that humans have special properties. Properties that could change the balance of power in our galaxy. The purple scanning beam made another pass, closer this time. James could feel a strange tingling sensation as it passed nearby, like the feeling he'd experienced when Ray had touched his arm to learn English. "What kind of properties?" he asked, leading them out the back door and into the rain. "Your DNA," Ray replied as they moved through the darkness. "It contains natural resistance to." She stopped suddenly, grabbing James's arm. "Wait, they're deploying ground units." 3 silvery spheres, each about the size of a basketball, dropped from the ships and began floating around the property. They moved with precise, mechanical movements, scanning everything in their path. James watched their pattern for a moment, then pulled Ray toward the old storm cellar behind his house. "Down here," he whispered. "The walls are lined with old lead pipes and iron supports. Might help mask whatever they're trying to detect." Ray looked impressed despite their dire situation. Lead and iron. Yes, that could work. The scanning beams would have trouble penetrating. A sharp crackling sound cut through the air as one of the sphere drones turned in their direction. James yanked the cellar door open, and they scrambled inside just as the drone fired some kind of energy pulse, leaving a scorched mark where they had been standing moments before. Inside the cellar, Ray's crystal device dimmed significantly. She smiled weakly. "You were right. The metal in the walls is interfering with both their scanners and my data core's energy signature." "Great," James said, pulling some old blankets from a shelf. "Now maybe you can tell me what's really going on. What's so special about human DNA?" Ray's expression became grave. "My people, we developed a weapon. A terrible weapon that could destroy entire solar systems by destabilizing the basic bonds that hold matter together." She clutched the data core tighter. "But during our testing, we discovered something extraordinary. Human cellular structure naturally resists this destabilization effect." Above them, they could hear the hum of the drones getting closer. Ray continued in a whisper. "If this information became widely known, the weapon would be useless. Dozens of worlds would seek Earth's protection and knowledge. My people's military advantage would vanish overnight." James listened to the drones searching outside, his mind racing. "So instead of accepting that and working with us, they decided to keep it secret," Ray finished. "By any means necessary." She looked at him apologetically. "I'm so sorry, James. I never meant to bring this war to your doorstep." The cellar door suddenly rattled as something tried to open it from outside. James grabbed the cellar door handle, holding it shut as something pulled from above. His mind raced through options. They needed a plan, and fast. "Those scanning drones," he whispered to Ray. "They track energy signatures, right?" Ray nodded, clutching her data core. "Yes, along with heat and movement patterns. They're designed to detect any sign of advanced technology." James looked around the cellar, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. Years of storing odds and ends down here might finally pay off. But they're not so good at finding simple things. Correct. They're calibrated for high-tech energy patterns, not, "What are you doing?" James had started pulling items from the shelves. An old car battery, some copper wire, his toolbox, and a garden hose. Making a distraction. Your people might have fancy tech, but sometimes the old ways work best. The pulling at the door stopped, replaced by a high-pitched whining sound. "They're preparing to breach," Ray said, her silver eyes wide with concern. "Whatever you're planning, we don't have much time." "Quick, help me with this," James said, stripping the copper wire. "When I was in the military, we had to deal with drone scouts too. Different tech, same principle. They all have weakness to electrical interference." Working rapidly, James connected the car battery to the copper wire, creating a crude electrical setup. He then wrapped the wire around an old metal rake head, creating a makeshift antenna. The garden hose he laid out leading to the far corner of the cellar. "When I give the signal, run that way." He pointed to where the hose led. The water will help mask our heat signatures. And this, he held up his contraption, should give those drones something else to look at. The whining sound grew louder. Sparks began to appear around the cellar door's edges. "James," Ray said softly, "your primitive technology can't possibly." "Trust me," he interrupted with a grim smile. "Sometimes primitive is exactly what you need." The door exploded inward with a crash. 3 scanning drones floated at the entrance, their purple scanning beams sweeping the cellar. "Now," James shouted, throwing the power switch on his makeshift device. The car battery surged, sending electricity through the copper antenna. The resulting electromagnetic pulse wasn't strong, but it was enough to disrupt the drone's sensitive scanning equipment. They wobbled in the air, their purple beams flickering erratically. James grabbed Ray's hand, and they ran toward the back of the cellar as he triggered the garden hose, spraying water into the air. The water droplets scattered the drone's remaining scanning beams, creating dozens of false readings. "The tunnel," James said, pulling aside an old shelf to reveal a narrow passage. The previous owner was a paranoid old miner. Dug passages all through these hills. They ducked into the tunnel just as the drones regained stability. Ray looked back in amazement as the confused machines hovered over the scattered water, their sensors overwhelmed by the multiple heat signatures and electrical interference. "That was incredible," she said as they hurried through the dark tunnel. "You defeated advanced alien technology with a car battery and a garden hose. Sometimes the simplest solutions are the best," James replied, pulling out a small flashlight. Those drones were looking for complex energy patterns. They weren't prepared for basic physics and water reflection. Ray was quiet for a moment as they walked. "My people were wrong about humans," she finally said. "We thought your lack of advanced technology made you primitive. But your ability to improvise, to think differently, it's remarkable." "We're full of surprises," James said, pausing to check the tunnel ahead. "Speaking of which, I know where this tunnel leads. There's an old iron mine about half a mile from here. The whole place is full of magnetic ore deposits, which would completely disrupt their scanning equipment," Ray finished, understanding dawning in her silver eyes. A distant explosion echoed through the tunnel behind them. The hunters were getting serious now. "We better hurry," James said, shining his light ahead. "They may have fancy weapons, but they're about to learn that sometimes low-tech problems need low-tech solutions." The old iron mine was exactly as James remembered it. Rusty tracks ran into the darkness, and the walls glittered with veins of magnetic ore. Their pursuers' scanning beams would be useless here. James helped Ray sit on an old mining crate. Her wound had started bleeding again during their escape, the purple fluid looking almost black in the dim light of his flashlight. "Let me check that bandage," he said, opening his medical bag. As he worked, Ray held up her crystal data core, its blue light reflecting off the mineral-rich walls. "There's something I need to show you," she said quietly. "You deserve to know the whole truth." She pressed a sequence of patterns on the device's surface, and suddenly the air filled with holographic images. James watched in amazement as 3D models of DNA strands floated before them, spinning slowly in the air. Some looked human, others were clearly alien. "What you're seeing," Ray explained, "is why my people are so afraid of humans. Your DNA isn't just resistant to our weapon. It's actually capable of adapting to and neutralizing it." She gestured, and the images changed to show cellular structures. "When we tested the weapon on human tissue samples, something unprecedented happened. Instead of breaking down, the cells evolved. They developed protection not just for themselves, but they could extend this protection to other species' cells as well." James finished changing her bandage, his eyes fixed on the floating displays. "So humans are like a universal vaccine against your weapon." "More than that," Ray said, wincing slightly as she shifted position. "Your adaptive abilities could be the key to protecting countless species across the galaxy. The militant faction of my people, they've spent centuries building weapons, establishing dominance through fear. Human DNA could undo all of that. A distant rumbling echoed through the mine tunnel. The hunters were getting closer, but their progress was slow in the magnetically charged environment. "That's why you really came to Earth, isn't it?" James asked, understanding dawning on his face. "Not just to hide, but to study us up close." Ray nodded. "We needed to understand how your DNA works in living humans, not just tissue samples. The data core contains everything: the weapon's specifications, its effects, and most importantly, proof of humanity's unique abilities." She looked at him intently. "Do you understand now why they can't let this information get out?" James sat back against the tunnel wall, processing this information. All this time, they'd been calling us primitive, looking down on Earth as some backwater planet. But really, they were afraid of us. "Afraid of what you could become," Ray corrected. "Your species is young, yes, but your potential." She gestured at the holographic displays. "In all my years of research, I've never seen anything like it. Your cells don't just survive our weapon. They learn from it, adapt to it, and then share that protection with others. It's beautiful." Another explosion echoed, closer this time. The hunters were using their weapons to clear a path through the magnetic interference. "They're getting closer," James said, standing up. "We need to move deeper into the mine." Ray switched off the holographic display. "There's more tunnels, miles of them. And I think I know a way we can use them to our advantage." He helped Ray to her feet. "You showed me how special human DNA is. Now let me show you what human ingenuity can do." As they moved deeper into the mine, James couldn't help but smile at the irony. The hunters had the most advanced technology in the galaxy, but here they were, being outmaneuvered in an abandoned iron mine by what they considered a primitive species. Sometimes, he thought, being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. James led Ray through the winding mine tunnels, his mind racing with plans. He'd spent years exploring these caves as a kid, and now that knowledge might save their lives. "How many hunters are after us?" he asked, helping Ray over a fallen beam. "A standard pursuit team. 6 hunters," she replied, her breath coming in short gasps. "They're elite soldiers, trained to track and capture at any cost." James nodded, pulling out his phone. There was no signal this deep in the mine, but that wasn't what he needed it for. He opened his contact list. "I'm calling in some help," he said, studying the names. "When I was a combat medic, I served with a special operations unit. 4 of them live in town now. They might think I'm crazy, but they'll come if I ask." Ray looked concerned. "James, these hunters have weapons that could." "That could what?" "Destabilize matter." He smiled grimly. "According to your research, we humans are pretty good at dealing with that. Besides, sometimes the old ways work best." 20 minutes later, they reached a large cavern where several tunnel entrances converged. James had made his calls at points where the tunnels briefly neared the surface, allowing signal to get through. Now they waited. They didn't wait long. 4 figures appeared from one of the tunnels, moving with the quiet efficiency of trained soldiers. James recognized his old teammates: Mike, the demolitions expert; Tom, their former sniper; Bill, communications specialist; and Dave, who'd been their tactical planner. "You said this was important, Doc," Mike said, adjusting his night vision goggles. "But you didn't say it was this interesting." He nodded toward Ray, seemingly unfazed by her alien appearance. "Long story," James replied. "Short version: bad guys with advanced tech are coming to kill us and possibly threaten Earth. We need to stop them." Dave grinned. "Just like old times, then." James quickly explained the situation while Ray showed them holographic images of the hunters' weapons and tactics. Instead of being intimidated, the veterans grew more excited as they spotted weaknesses in the hunters' approach. "They rely too heavily on their tech," Tom observed. "They're not expecting conventional resistance. Those scanning beams can't penetrate the iron ore," Bill added. "They'll have to come in blind. And we know these tunnels better than anyone. Mike finished, pulling out some equipment from his bag. I brought some surprises, just in case. They worked quickly, setting up their defense. Mike rigged simple but effective traps using mining equipment and his own explosives. Tom found perfect sniper positions hidden in the natural rock formations. Bill set up old-fashioned signal flares for communication, and Dave coordinated their positioning. Ray watched in amazement. "You're not using any advanced technology at all," she said. "Just basic tools and planning." "Sometimes basic is better," James replied. "Their fancy scanners can't detect rope and pulleys. Their energy shields won't expect physical debris. And they definitely won't be ready for good old-fashioned guerrilla tactics." The first explosion echoed through the tunnels. The hunters were getting close. "Remember," James told his friends, "their weapons can destabilize matter. But according to Ray's research, we humans have natural resistance. Don't get hit if you can help it, but don't be too afraid of their tech either." 6 highly trained alien hunters with advanced technology, Dave said, checking his rifle. Against 5 primitive humans with basic weapons and home field advantage. He smiled. "I almost feel sorry for them." The hunters' energy weapons began to light up the tunnel ahead with an otherworldly glow. "Positions," James whispered. As everyone moved to their places, Ray touched his arm. "I've never seen anything like this," she said softly. "Your people don't even hesitate to help each other, to fight against impossible odds." "That's the thing about humans," James replied, readying himself. "We don't believe in impossible odds." The first hunter appeared at the tunnel entrance, weapon raised, about to learn a harsh lesson about underestimating primitive species. The battle in the mine was short but intense. The hunters, for all their advanced technology, had never faced an enemy quite like this before. They weren't prepared for simple tripwires that sent mining carts rolling into their formation. They didn't expect old-fashioned smoke flares that blocked their vision when their scanning devices were already blinded by the iron ore. Tom's precise shots from hidden positions forced them to waste energy maintaining their shields. Mike's carefully placed explosives didn't try to break through their advanced armor. They just brought down enough rock and debris to control their movement. Bill's mirror signals coordinated the team's attacks perfectly, while Dave's strategy kept the hunters confused and separated. James stayed with Ray, protecting the data core while treating any injuries his teammates received. The hunters' matter-destabilizing weapons left strange burns, but just as Ray's research had shown, human tissue fought back against the effects, healing faster than it should. The turning point came when the hunter's commander made a crucial mistake. Frustrated by the humans' primitive but effective tactics, he ordered his team to unleash their weapons at full power. "They're going to try to destabilize the entire cave system," Ray shouted, her silver eyes wide with alarm. But James smiled. "That's exactly what we wanted them to do." The hunters fired their weapons simultaneously, the energy building to a massive surge that should have torn the cave apart at a molecular level. Instead, something extraordinary happened. The humans' natural resistance, amplified by their proximity to each other and their shared purpose, created a kind of feedback loop. The destabilization effect bounced back, overwhelming the hunters' own shields. Their weapons overloaded, and within moments, the mighty hunters found themselves defenseless. "Throw down your weapons," Dave called out. "It's over." The hunters, their advanced technology now useless, had no choice but to surrender. As James's team secured them, Ray stepped forward, holding up her data core. "Your mission has failed," she told the hunter commander. "And more importantly, you've just proven my research correct. Humans don't just resist the destabilization effect. They can reflect it back. They can protect others from it. They are exactly what our galaxy needs." The commander looked at the humans with new eyes, finally understanding. "All this time, we thought we were superior." "That was your mistake," James said, helping one of his friends bandage a minor wound. "You thought advanced technology made you better. But real strength isn't about having the fanciest weapons. It's about working together, adapting, and never giving up. In the days that followed, Ray's data was transmitted to her people's scientific council. The evidence was undeniable. Humanity's unique genetic gift, combined with their remarkable ability to adapt and cooperate, made them essential to the galaxy's future. The military faction that had pursued Ray was disbanded. Instead of weapons of destruction, Ray's people began focusing on how to work with humans to protect and heal other species. James's property became the site of the first human-alien scientific cooperation center. His old barn was converted into a laboratory where scientists from across the galaxy came to study human DNA and learn from humanity's unique perspective on problem-solving. "You know what still amazes me," Ray said to James one evening, as they watched the sunset from his porch. The research center behind them hummed with activity as human and alien scientists worked together. "What's that?" James asked. "That the very things my people saw as primitive, your resourcefulness, your reliance on simple solutions, your instinct to help others, turned out to be your greatest strengths." James smiled, watching a group of young human and alien researchers excitedly discussing a new discovery. Maybe that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy. Not just our DNA, but our reminder that the simplest solutions are often the best ones. And that being underestimated, Ray added with a smile of her own, can sometimes be the greatest advantage of all. Above them, the stars twinkled with new possibility. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger galaxy, not as conquerors or subjects, but as protectors and teachers. And it had all started because one human had chosen to help a stranger in need, proving that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in advanced technology, but in simple human kindness.